worked very closely, and a great note of appreciation for all the participants who have actually brought in very specialist profiles into this conclave. We have, of course, the GCF. We have international organizations like the World Bank represented here. We have state government participation in excellent numbers. And today morning, I was at least extremely enthused to see the commitment that the central and state governments showed towards climate change. The addresses of our honorable ministers from Environment, Forest, and the Honorable Chief Minister of UP indicated how well the government of India and all state governments are fully geared towards tackling the change and the challenge that is posed by climate change. One of the very key aspects of climate change is the impact that it has on the lives and livelihoods of people. May I request people to settle down and to bring silence to the room? Otherwise, I think we are all wasting our time here. So I would like to say that the challenges to lives and livelihoods that is posed by climate change really needs a multi-pronged strategy. The effort has to match with the words, the policies that are needed. So Government of India, for instance, we have just updated our NDCs. We have shown that we can walk the talk. We made a commitment in 2015 in terms of our NDCs. We went on to achieve them much in advance of 2030 and then scaled up our ambitions even further. And all this while we are addressing the growth needs of a 1.4 billion plus population. So that is a very clear indication of how much we are committed to taking the right steps. And the release of the State Action Plan for Climate Change, which the government of UP just did in the last session, and the fact that many states, almost all states in the country, have also developed their action plans for climate change. They have their missions in place: sustainable agriculture, drinking water. All of these are part and parcel, urban planning, transportation. All these are part of the actions that state governments need to put in place, and I'm very happy to see that they are doing it. But the last point that I want to make in response to your question is that we really need to see an extra foot forward being taken by organizations like the GCF, because we need to leverage funds. We need the GCF to actually scale up big time and fast, because scale, scope, speed, all of them are extremely important if we want to have a long-term impact. And indeed, we must have a long-term impact to address the adverse impacts of climate change. We need the multilateral bodies like the World Bank to actually be able to bring in innovative financial instruments, so that when the state governments make provisions, when central government makes its policy dispensation through sovereign green bonds, sustainable financing for urban...
Hello.
All of these have to be matched by equal, if not more, leveraging of funds from these organizations and institutions. So I hope a discussion like today will actually pave the way for much more private sector, multilateral development bank, GCF type of co-working on projects, and state governments are already showing their full commitment in taking the necessary steps. So I hope this conference will actually be very meaningful in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
सर 1 मिनट के लिए एक अनाउंसमेंट करना है. जैसा कि आप सब जानते हैं, बहुत सारे सेशंस होने हैं, बहुत सारे विषयों पर विचार मंथन करना है. तो इसीलिए हम चाहते हैं सभी वक्ताओं को समय मिले और सभी के विचार हम सुने. तो समय की सीमा का सभी लोग ध्यान रखेंगे, ये निवेदन किया जा रहा है. और उस सीमा से आपको अवगत कराने के लिए एक बेल बजेगी, तो कृपया उसे अन्यथा न लें. अपनी समय सीमा, जो कि शायद सभी वक्ताओं को 5 मिनट दी गई है, उसी में अपनी बात कहने की कृपा करें. धन्यवाद.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll keep it to the time. Thanks so much, ma'am. I really like the points, scales, scope, and the speed. I think these three are very, very important points that we need to work further. And the climate finance. Now, when we talk about climate action, as ma'am said, climate finance is an important aspect, and that is where I would like Carolina, the director of Global Green Climate Fund, to pitch in here. Carolina, can you just tell us what has been the strategies of GCF towards localizing climate action and also working on the ground? Over to you.
Many thanks for that, and also I would like to start by appreciating the Ministry of Environment and Forests and Climate Change of the Government of India and the Government of Uttar Pradesh for inviting us to this meeting. And thank you as well, Secretary Leena Nandan, for it is an honor for us to share this panel with you and with all the distinguished speakers. Many thanks for your question also, and for us it's very good as well to see that there are different stakeholders gathering in this conclave that demonstrates that climate change can only be addressed by a whole of society response. And that is something as well that the GCF is trying to mobilize, rallying countries in terms of coordinating with different stakeholders so we can have informed climate action to be supported by GCF and by our network of partners. Now, going to your particular question as well as to the actions and the strategy that climate change, that the Green Climate Fund follows to support climate change projects, I would like to refer as well to the fact that the Green Climate Fund is a country-driven organization, and countries such as India have already identified their climate priorities. As just mentioned, India has presented an updated national determined contribution to the Climate Convention, and that is the starting point as well on which India can continue identifying and driving further climate action, including to a national adaptation plan and also to very specific proposals that can take the form of co-investment platforms or particular interventions in early warning systems, for example. That is only a couple of examples, but everything comes from the identification of priorities at the national level. GCF is a country-driven organization. To do this as well, we support the countries in catalyzing climate finance, and that is something important. GCF is not only a provider of climate finance that enhances access to countries, but also we mobilize resources from others. Just to give you an example of what we have done together with the Government of India, we have supported 3 readiness projects for capacity building and 7 funding proposals for a total amount of $500 million. This is $500 million from the GCF, but this has helped catalyze $2.4 billion from other sources. So that means that roughly we have mobilized $3 billion for climate activities in India. This is the power that the GCF has as well on the way forward to catalyze resources. And for that, we also take the feedback about the need of scale, scope, and speed. And we are partnering with other organizations as well in terms of accelerating climate innovation, de-risking investments, so we can come in as a source of finance that can reduce the level of risk for public and private investors to come in with their capital and mobilize more resources. And we also green the local financial sector, so countries can have also a financial sector that is more aligned and consistent with supporting climate-informed investment decisions. We look forward to continue working with India in very specific initiatives, and as mentioned earlier, some of the opportunities lying ahead are co-investment platforms and also supporting early warning systems. But we look forward to identifying other areas of support so we can continue supporting India on the way forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carolina. Accelerated climate action and also aligning with India's climate goal is what I hear from her. Round of applause for Carolina for all the good work that you're doing, Carolina. Thank you so much. Thank you. I will now cross over to Chhattisgarh, one of the states which has a very good forest cover and has been working on climate change, localizing the climate action. My speaker is Mr. Manoj Kumar Pingua, and he's the IAS Principal Secretary Forest and Climate Change, Government of Chhattisgarh. So, Mr. Manoj, if I could ask you, what has been some of the steps that I can give you this? Yeah. What has been some of the steps that Chhattisgarh has taken that we can learn from for climate action? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Since climate change impacts are felt at multiple levels, from global to local, and hence the action response against climate change is also required from different levels, global, national, subnational, and local. I would like to draw the attention of this House to the guiding principles which were issued by MOF in its common framework for revision of SAPCC, which envisages as inclusive, sustainable, and climate resilient low carbon development pathways, and which should protect the poor and vulnerable sections of society from adverse effects of climate change. So we generally emphasize over the conventional polluters or conventional culprits like industries, vehicles and large construction activities. But in a state like Chhattisgarh, where we have more than 30% of the population living below poverty line, and among them majority are deprived tribals and other caste groups. So we cannot overlook their needs and their involvement, their participation in the mitigation efforts. छत्तीसगढ़ में 4 साल पहले जब प्रेजेंट सरकार बनी तो उस समय हमारे माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी ने एक नारा दिया, नरवा गरवा घुरवा और बाड़ी इनका हमला बचाना है संगवारी. Means we have to save these 4 symbols of Chhattisgarh. Narwa means nala, rivulets. Garwa means maveshi, the cattle, livestock, we can call cattle or entire livestock. And Ghurwa means compost pit or vermicompost pit or other traditional compost pit. And then Badi. Badi means the kitchen garden. In Chhattisgarh, a scheme called Suraji Gaon Yojana, which has 4 components to develop these 4 things. ये जो नरवा का प्रोग्राम है, नरवा में 29,000 नालों को ट्रीट करने का टारगेट रखा गया, उनको आइडेंटिफाई किया गया और अभी एट प्रेजेंट लगभग 12,000 नालों का ट्रीटमेंट भी किया जा चुका है और उसमें 42 लाख से ज़्यादा छोटे छोटे स्ट्रक्चर, चेक डैम, गली प्लगिंग और इस तरह से एकदम छोटे छोटे स्ट्रक्चर बना के उनका ट्रीटमेंट किया गया. और इसमें गांव वाले लोग पूरी तरह से सक्रिय रूप से इन्वॉल्व हैं क्योंकि इसका इम्पैक्ट उनको सीधे सीधे दिखाई देता है. जैसे नरवा के ट्रीटमेंट से वाटर टेबल बढ़ गया, जिसको कि कोई भी आम आदमी कुएं में पहले कितना लेवल रहता था वो 10 से 15 सेंटीमीटर ऊपर आ गया. और उसके अलावा वेजिटेशन में जो चेंज आया है वो भी सबको आसानी से दिखाई देता है. पॉन्डेज एरिया बढ़ गया. तो ये चीज़ें हैं जो आम लोगों को इन्वॉल्व करने के लिए हेल्प करती है. उसके बाद जो गरबा है वो लाइक मेनी अदर एरियाज ऑफ आवर कंट्री, जो मिल्क कैटल है वो बहुत ज़्यादा उसका मिल्क प्रोडक्शन नहीं है और इसलिए उसमें दूसरी चीज़ें भी इम्पॉर्टेंट हो जाती हैं. तो ये गरबा इनिशिएटिव के तहत स्टेट में लगभग 10,000 गौठान बनाए गए हैं. ये 10,000 गौठान जो हैं, गौठान जो ट्रेडिशनली गौठान का हिंदी नाम सब लोग समझते होंगे, जहाँ दिन में हमारे पशु गाय बैल बकरी इत्यादि बैठते हैं. तो ये जो गौठान बनाए गए तो उससे सबसे पहला फ़ायदा तो ये हुआ कि गांव में आजकल कहीं पर भी आपको खाली ज़मीन नहीं मिलती है, सारी ज़मीन कब्जा हो जाती है. तो ये गौठान बनाने से ये 10,000 गौठान में 5 से 10 एकड़ प्रति गौठान जगह कब्जे में आ गई और वहाँ उसको मल्टी एक्टिविटी सेंटर के रूप में डेवलप कर लिया गया. वहाँ चारागाह का अल्टरनेट विकास किया गया और उसके अलावा वहाँ जो पशु बैठते हैं तो उसके बाद एक और उससे जुड़ी हुई स्कीम चालू की गई, गोधन न्याय योजना, जो पूरे कंट्री में एक यूनिक टाइप की स्कीम है, जिसमें कि 2 रुपए किलो गोबर की खरीदी की जाती है।
धन्यवाद मनोज जी, थोड़ा सा टाइम की हमारी कमी है, तो आप 2 मिनट में
अच्छा।
अगर 2 सेकंड में अगर
हाँ हाँ
बात
हाँ,
खत्म
बिल्कुल
करें।
बिल्कुल। हाँ, तो ये कुछ इनिशिएटिव्स हैं जो कि जिससे जिससे कि जो कि आम आदमी से जुड़े हुए हैं, और इनसे जुड़े होने के कारण क्लाइमेट चेंज मिटिगेशन के लिए जो एफर्ट्स हैं, हाँ
जी।
उसमें इनकी भागीदारी सुनिश्चित होती है, तो निश्चित रूप से इसमें बहुत फायदा होगा।
बहुत
धन्यवाद।
बहुत धन्यवाद मनोज पिंगुआ जी, बहुत बहुत थैंक यू सो मच, a round of applause for him, and wonderful work that Chhattisgarh is doing. Let me just cross over to Manoj Singh. He is the additional chief secretary, Department of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of Uttar Pradesh. Manoj ji, if you can just tell us
I'm
some
this side.
examples of some innovative, oh sorry, innovative approaches that Uttar Pradesh has done, and I know we have heard in the morning itself. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. First of all, I will like to tell you about the framing of SAP-CC policy when we were making it. So we were addressing to the issue of finance. So our chief secretary told, why don't you look into the various aspects of the schemes that you have, the component of the scheme, delve into it, and see how much money you can get from the existing scheme by just fine-tuning those schemes towards climate change and environment. And then we went into a detailed exercise. We had a series of meetings with all the principal secretaries and additional chief secretaries of different departments. And we found, when we prepared we found that 80% of the money was percolating down through the existing schemes, whether it is of central government or state government. And it was very convenient for us to find money. Then we targeted the third tier of democracy, which is, and we had this one whole day session with, we have 58,000 villages. So all the pradhans were linked online, and we had COP26, Conference of Panchayats, where we addressed whole day on environment and climate, on the plastic disposal. And impact was, there was immense participation, and there was innovative means which pradhans themselves suggested how we could do about it. Some interventions I will like to itemize is, one, there was a concept of Bartan Bank where you recycle your utensils instead of using this plastic utensils and all. And similarly, plastic bank in each village. Then we, as a forest department, we went into details of how many Naya Panchayats have nursery or not. Now, Naya Panchayat is 9 villages, so we have made a plan that every 9 village we will have one nursery. So there is a afforestation program, especially, and the afforestation program is linked to carbon credits also. So there are 12 districts where carbon credit has been linked to the afforestry program of farmer. There, each and every stock has been now taken into account, and $6 per tree they will be getting from December. So this is additional benefit. He is getting the money from selling the standing crop, but additional bonus kind of thing for carbon locked. So these were some of the initiatives. Amrit Sarovar, which Honorable Chief Minister told, Amrit Sarovar has been built in Village for water recharge, and this has been done by Manrega Fund. So we are also this time earmarking Manrega Fund for our nursery program, so that we can have a nursery in a large scale. And also, this time, Forest Department has made its nursery 70% timber oriented. So that for climate change, you have to grow fast species, cut those fast species, lock those fast species in furnitures, doors, and buildings. And that is the mechanism we are doing this time, so that there is not only doubling of farmer income, but tripling of farmer income.
Wonderful. Very good example of the conversion. Can we have a round of applause for UP leading the way? Very good example, sir. Thank you so much. Let me cross over to Neerab Kumar Prasad ji. He is the Special Secretary, Environment, Forest, Science and Technology, Government of Andhra Pradesh. Yeah, okay. So, is he here? Yeah. So, yeah, can you just give me the mic? So, If you can just elaborate a little bit on, the government's effort in localizing climate action, what has been some of the steps?
Thank you. Can I have the presentation? Then just few minutes. From Andhra Pradesh, we have essentially tried to localize the effect of the climate change. And Andhra Pradesh being a coastal city, please next, please carry on. Being a coastal, it has 974 kilometers of coastline. So our first effort has been to study the effect of the increase of temperature of sea on the coastal areas. And that has been our focus to begin with. Next, please. So we have studied the whole coastline and have identified certain areas which have to be taken up under a immediate attempt to take some action on the ground level. Next slide, please. So what we did is we took the common hazard line prepared by the Government of India and placed it on our map and tried to identify the areas which are affected. And that is this map, which comes to about 10,000 square kilometers. Now, this common hazard line includes cyclones, it includes tsunamis, it includes climate change. We are now trying to make the climate change effect exclusive to the cyclone and tsunami effects. That is one part of the desire. The second is we also want to see this effect on the cities. I'll just come to that. But next, please. So what we did is we first, out of these 10,000 square kilometers, we identified 5,000 hectares of mangrove areas which were degraded, 200 hectares of salt marshes, seagrass and seaweed habitats, and the coastal Krishna and Godavari and few other smaller rivers, watersheds, which are very critical for the whole habitat and environment improvement. Next, please. And we identified 7 landscapes which are listed here. Next, please. And also the 2 cities of Kakinada and Visakhapatnam that we will target our coastal climate change effect action plan on these areas in one of the projects, not the whole projects, but in one of the projects. And then we took up with the GCF. Next slide, please. And we have got a sanction of a GCF project in which our partners are the NCSCM, which is developing the whole vulnerability assessment and mitigation interventions. The Forest Department, which is taking up works in mangroves, salt marshes, and the coastal watersheds. Fisheries Department, which is working on the livelihoods. And the Municipal Department, which is making the cities of Kakinada and Visakhapatnam climate resilient. Next. And this is one of the slides which is just showing what we are doing in effect. The blue color shows the effect of the climate change which we are expecting in the Pulicat Lake. This is one of the examples. I thank you all for giving me this opportunity. We are trying to localize the effect of the big word called climate change. Thank you
so much, Nirav ji. Wonderful initiative. Thank you so much. Yeah. Let me cross over further south to Kerala. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Sunil Pamidi. He is an IFS officer, Director of Directorate of Environment and Climate Change, Government of Kerala. And Kerala has been, again, very rich in biodiversity. Could you tell us a little bit on the policy approaches to conserve biodiversity in Kerala and what can we learn from them? Over to you, Sunil.
Thank you, respected chair and respected co-panelists, distinguished participants and organizers. Good afternoon, everyone. To talk about Kerala in terms of climate change risk and vulnerability, to give you a little background about Kerala. Kerala, we have very long coastline of close to 500 kilometers on the western front. And on the eastern side, we have, again, equally long length of Western Ghat region. And the land available between these two coast and the between the coast and the Western Ghats is very limited. We have legal forest cover of close to 30%. And if you consider the tree growth outside the forest, the total forest cover of the state is 55%. So that leaves us in a very precarious situation in the sense that the population density of Kerala is 3 times the national average, which is 830 persons persons per square kilometer. And if you see the coastal areas alone, leave the hill ranges, the coastal areas alone, the population density is more than 2,200 people per square kilometer. So that brings us to a very precarious situation where the coastal population are residing. At the same time, we have the vagaries of climate change in terms of sea level rise, intrusion of salinity into the water bodies, and even loss of some of the coastal areas due to high tidal actions. So in that way, Kerala, we have seen very unprecedented rainfall in the year 2018. So that was a kind of eye-opener for the state to localize the climate action, to bring in the resilience into the planning process. So since 2018, the state government has been very conscious, taking conscious efforts to bring in the resilience into the planning of the local bodies. As you know, the Kerala's local bodies after the constitutional amendment have been very active. They are managing their affairs very effectively at the local level. So the local bodies have made their disaster management plans at the local body level, and they brought in the concept of resilience into their planning. Every year they set aside to develop resilience. Certain portion of their budget, local bodies set aside that money to bring in the resilience. So coming back to the biodiversity. So biodiversity in terms of the forest regions, as I told, it's 30% of the land is covered with forests, and more than 55% of the total geography area is under forest, considering the tree cover outside the forest. How the government has approached the last 2 years to this, we have very limited scope in terms of expansion of forest areas, but government very consciously has moved away from the very traditional approach to the forestry, which is mainly timber oriented, which was concentrated around teak, acacia. These are monoculture plantations which were started during the colonial regime, and they continued for very long years. But now the government's policy is that we will restore all those plantations, which are monoculture plantations basically, to a natural forest of mixed species which are indigenous to Kerala. So that was one step, a very important step that the government has taken. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we have a round of applause for all the biodiversity conservation program Kerala is doing, spearheading the work. And it's the right time for me to switch over to Mr. Achulendra Reddy. He is the chairperson of National Biodiversity Board. So if you could just take it from there, and how do we look at some of the policy approaches Government of India? Could you share some light on it? Over to you, sir.
Respected Chair, Madam Leena Nandanji, and Moderator Dr. Anjal Prakash, and distinguished guests, it's a great privilege for me to be here, and I thank the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and the Department of Environment, Forest and Change of the Uttar Pradesh government for giving me an opportunity to share a few of my thoughts on the climate change and biodiversity. As we all know, climate change and biodiversity are the two sides of the same coin. And it affects, climate change will affect biodiversity, and also biodiversity would affect the climate change in a positive way. Now, we should thank God that India is one of the 17 mega biodiversity countries in the world, and we have about 2% of area, 2.4% of the area, but 8% of the known species. About 55,000 species of fauna, and 1 lakh faunal species have been recorded. And you know, it's a miracle that 17% of the global population is in India. Almost 16 to 17% of the cattle population of the world is in India. In spite of this, we have a large network of national parks, sanctuaries, as we all know, yesterday how the Project Tiger, the results were announced and the number were announced. And besides that, we have about 36 biodiversity heritage sites established under Biological Diversity Act. This makes a very good network of conservation of biodiversity. But at the same time, India is inching forward to become almost, we have become 5th largest economy, and we are aiming at $5 trillion economy in the coming years. So this will definitely have an effect on biodiversity. So this we cannot shy away from taking positive action. The challenge is to attain the balance between the economic development and also protection and conservation of biodiversity. So this is a very challenging target or challenging goal before us. So coming to the policy levers, internationally, we have sustainable development goals. Sustainable Development Goal 11, 13, 11 is resilient cities, 13 is climate change, taking action to develop a resilience against climate change. 14 is life below water, marine and coastal biodiversity. And 15 is the biodiversity, terrestrial biodiversity. And coming to recently adopted the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, where we have directly 3 targets are related to biodiversity and climate change. That is target 2, target 3, and target 8. I will not go into the details since time is very short. So the point here I would like to highlight is that what are the policy levers at the national level which we are going to do. The Government of India has announced the Agro-Forest Policy 2014. It only, the climate change is, nobody can deny it. So whatever is possible, we have certain policy levers which we have to implement. And trees outside the forest make a lot of sense, both economically and ecologically. Therefore, this agroforestry policy, in my personal view, it may be a little updated, and that is one of the best strategies to counter the climate change. Next, coming to Misty, recently the Honorable Finance Minister has announced mangroves for shoreline habitat and tangible incomes, where 540 square kilometers, almost 54,000 square hectares of mangroves, which is going to definitely help us in protecting our huge coastline, about 7,500 odd kilometers. So these are the policy levers which we know, and there is a national bamboo mission, there is a life mission. These are the things which we need to utilize for striking a balance between biodiversity conservation and taking action against the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. A round of applause for him. Very nice work that, yes, round of applause for him, first of all. Thank you. See, you have biodiversity conservation and how it can lead to climate action and vice versa is something that is interesting part. Let me cross over to Shailendra Dwivedi ji. He's the Director of Climate Change and Circular Economy at GIZ. They are doing wonderful work, including I've seen some of the work and very, very localized work that they are doing. So, Shailendra, how do you, what are the things that you learned from GIZ's efforts on local actions, and what's something that we can learn from you?
Thanks, Pranjal. I think we can make development program resilient. And I mean, in all our effort, which we are kind of implementing in UP with Department of Environment, we have leveraged the existing development program, and we have kind of capacitated the actors to bring in the resilience angle into the development program. So that can actually bring a kind of a very huge catalytic effect in terms of developing resilience at the local level. There are very interesting entry points, Gram Panchayat Development Plan. So in UP, we have tried along with Department of Panchayati Raj to make resilient Gram Panchayat Development Plan. And incidentally, Ministry of Panchayati Raj, NDMAs, even NAPCCs, they provide very supportive policy framework to integrate resilience into the Gram Panchayat Development Program. So that's one thing which can be immediately leveraged to kind of promote resilience at the community level. Now, for doing that, I think the whole capacity development has to be much more action-oriented, result-oriented at the local level. And that's where we found that, and we are very closely working with many training institutes. And one of the realization which is coming up that now State Institute of Rural Development has to be revisualized as State Institute for Rural and Resilience Development. So in all their training programs, resilience should be the integral part of the curriculum. That's one thing we have come across. The other interesting part is women. I mean, as we know now, climate hazards, impact of climate change have triggered migration, especially of the male population from the rural area. Now that leaves women behind. What we have realized that now, and they now are expected to take care of the farm activities. Unfortunately, so far, women have not been a very organic part of the farm extension services. So there is a need to revisit the whole farm extension services and make it much more gender sensitive, and that will hugely contribute to the resilience of women community. That's another kind of, you may say it, innovations which we are trying to implement in UP and HP with the respective state department. And the third element which I would like to start here is that it has been actually spoken in different words. Adaptation and resilience measures need special finance. Can we set up a climate action support facility which which encourages innovative ideas, innovative projects? And that's what now, again, with UP government, we are trying to bring in public-private panchayat partnership. So panchayat is an integral part of that to design innovative, transformative project ideas that can be kind of financed through innovative financing instruments. So that's another area through which you can really incentivize community action and promote resilience on the ground.
Thank you so much, Shailen. Can we have a round of applause for GIZ and the great work that they're doing in terms of climate action? Last but not, before we go to Ashish, I'll first go to Farha, and Farha Zahir is the senior economist at World Bank, and the question to you, Farha, is how do we look at green finance from the bank's perspective? What has been some of the strategies for you to localize climate action through green finance? Over to you, ma'am.
Respected chairperson, esteemed panel members, organizers, and respected guests in the room. It gives me great pleasure to be part of this panel discussion. And I think Sir has asked a very important question, which requires a look at the policy framework in which all these changes on climate change and local action have to take place, and what are the challenges that the current institutional framework poses to us. So some reflections on that point. India is a large federal country, and thus understanding the institutions of fiscal decentralization, the way they are framed and operate in India, is the first step to addressing the question of climate finance for local action. We need to look at this question through the prism of fiscal decentralization pillars, which include revenue assignment, expenditure responsibilities, intergovernmental transfer system, and the borrowing framework. What we see in India is that the current, the current functional assignment of responsibilities is right and offer an answer to the question of which level of government will be charged with regulating and monitoring compliance with the different sectoral policies for climate change. Getting the other three pillars right will allow us to answer the question of financing. India seems to have the right framework of concurrent assignments of responsibilities at the union and state level, and as the chairperson has already mentioned, it works quite well for climate strategy through the National Action Plan for Climate Change at the union level, and at the state level, it is the State Action Plan for Climate Change, which are very important parameters now. However, what we need to see is at the local level. At the local level, we still feel that the expenditure assignment is fuzzy due to unclear mandates and duplication, incomplete devolution of powers in terms of funds, functions, and functionaries. And as many panelists have talked about how they are trying to devolve some powers, and also as Mr. Manoj Singh mentioned about the COP that he had with the panchayats. I think these are very important, significant reflections that how you can empower local action, and that is also following the 73rd and the 74th amendments. On the revenue side, I think the weak revenue raising capacity at the local level is an issue. So far, what we see is that the most versatile and adaptable instrument has been the intergovernmental transfer system. On the borrowing side, definitely, you need a lot of, the framework needs a lot of financing instruments for both environment and climate change investments. And one has to look at fiscal discipline, moral hazard, and contingent liabilities. So in a nutshell, what you need to do is, we need to curate a better, trustworthy, a more disciplined system within the existing institutional framework where the local governments can make concerted efforts and informed efforts towards climate strategies. Also, we need to ensure that the fund flow to local governments are predictable and they are continuously provided funds both through the State Finance Commission and the Central Finance Commission. It's also important to avoid things like natural resource traps at the local level. There is also a provision through the ecological fiscal transfer that the 14th and the 15th Finance Commission has recently provided, and this needs to be continued. I think one has to look at enhancing the allocative and technical efficiency of funds through fund convergence and better public expenditure management. So in a nutshell, as this chair wants me to, as the moderator wants me to complete, I would just say that in a nutshell, the institutional framework, the policy framework is already there, but India can achieve a lot by tweaking at the margin the existing policy framework for local action. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Farah. That's wonderful. Yeah, a big round of applause to her, first of all. Yes, thank you. I think this localizing action and the need for climate finance is an important point that you have brought in. Let me cross over to the last speaker of the panel, and then I will open it up for questions, answers from the audience. Ashish, can you just, and first of all, I was here last year when this conference has focused on UP. Now it has become national. And I would actually like to congratulate Ashish and his big team who is working round the clock for last couple of days that I know. First of a big round of applause to Ashish and his team for organizing such a beautiful conference at such a level. As an IPCC author, I have, one thing which we have been taught is that your research must make sense to the people, and how do you communicate this directly to the local people is the key. So Ashish, my question to you is, how do we look into the issue of communication and localized action when it comes to climate change at the local level? Over to you, Ashish.
Thank you, Anjal. Like UP is, we always say that it's not a state, it's a country. The magnanimity of Uttar Pradesh is it has got over 58,000 gram panchayats, over 750 urban local bodies. So the challenge of climate action at the local level is basically planning, climate planning. We should have a very robust plan for gram panchayats and cities. If you want to develop a plan at the local level, then you must have very downscaled data sets on climate impacts at the local level. We are actually in the state of Uttar Pradesh trying to develop model climate smart action plans and climate smart city action plans so that those models can be replicated at a large scale throughout the state. That is one thing. The biggest financing challenge which is coming across is on basically climate knowledge and research and the downscaling of data sets for villages, for micro-agroclimatic zones and district level, village level and city level. Within the city you have you have the heat zones. One plan cannot be applicable to the whole city because it has got different heat impact zones in the city. I'm just pointing out one example. So the biggest challenge for downscaling climate action is robust planning, research, generating data sets, etc. For that, there are some critical gaps. As Manoj sir has already pointed out, that we have done a state action plan wherein 72% of the funds are available through convergence of various schemes, but there is a gap of 28%, and that too, some of the gaps are such that where we don't have any financing. So there we have stepped out for private panchayat partnership kind of a model, which is a kind of a very innovative model. And we are also trying to collaborate with research educational institutions so that various schemes of DSTs, etc., can be brought in those research institute at the local level, district level, and those universities, institutes can be developed as climate knowledge center to actually develop plan and implement plan. So these are the some challenges and the financing requirements for climate action, and of course the communication with the panchayats. We have to make things very simple so that already our traditional knowledge has everything about climate action, climate resilience, climate adaptation. The only thing is we have to understand the local needs and develop a plan and channelize the resources for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashish. Thank you. Round of applause for him. Okay, so I have been given 10 more minutes by the organizers. So let me open it up for question and answers. I'll take only 5 questions. When you are asking a question, please identify yourself and very quickly just tell me the question that you have. Ma'am here, yeah. Ma'am, identify yourself and very quick question, yeah? No comments, only question. And tell us who is it being directed to. There's one more coming, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Rupanjali Karthik. I'm representing Government of Punjab here. I'm the Special Secretary, Department of Science, Technology and Environment. My question is for Leena ma'am, and it's regarding the carbon trading, ma'am. I think Punjab is one example where some pilots are being conducted for carbon trading on the basis of agroforestry. And a couple of things we just heard on the dais that similar things are happening perhaps in UP also. So the question is, we feel that there is perhaps some kind of a regulatory gap where the states are experimenting, which is a good thing. Voluntary markets are coming up, but there could be potential risks. So what the central government is planning in the near future, kind of a framework for this sector? Thank you.
Yeah, this is a very relevant question because the whole carbon trading system is in the process of being put into place jointly by the Ministry of Power and Ministry of Environment. And a carbon trading platform, there is already a national designated agency that is headed by the Ministry of Environment, where the concerned ministries like Power are also participants. And the whole framework that is being developed is to put into place the voluntary market, but a market where there is a registry, there is a transparency of trading, monitoring and verification, and more than everything else, the avoidance of double counting. Because the government of India has already declared its nationally determined contributions, and our targets for reduction in emission intensity has also been declared. So every trading has to be within the framework of the NDC, and any international trading would be possible only if it is allowed and certified by the nationally designated agency. So that is already a system which is in place. We are in the process of finalizing the framework and coming out with very detailed guidelines. But I would also like to take this opportunity to say that we are developing a green credit trading system which goes beyond carbon trading. It's about all pro-environment actions, and I think there's a dedicated session later in the day where this whole green credit mechanism would be explained by the ministry. It offers tremendous opportunity to all organizations, individuals, communities, gram panchayats to get revenue, to get economic benefit out of pro-environment actions like developing plantations on the community land, maintaining water bodies, even farmers who move towards environment-friendly practices and environment-friendly crops, proper waste management. All of these would be equivalent to a green credit, and this green credit would be traded on a platform. That system is being put into place, and we are taking the opportunity of this conclave to share this concept in the concerned session. So I will request all the participants to kindly come for that session because it is extremely relevant and extremely interesting at this point of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, some more questions, please. Yes, there. Tell us identify yourself and tell us who is this directed to.
Hello everybody, I am Sunny Rawat representing Tata Trust. So my question to the question for the Ashish ji, however he is not there.
Okay. Tell us the question.
Anyone from the panelists?
Yeah,
Like India is a diversified country with agroclimatic zones, agroecological zones. What will be the strategy for the farmers when the climatic factors are cost-benefit analysis at farmers level, cost-benefit analysis at subsidy when aside, natural resource accounting and environmental accounting? What will be your strategy?
Okay, that's a long question. Let me see who. Neerav, you want to answer this? Okay. Okay, ma'am.
I think one very important aspect of how farmers have a very important role to play was mentioned by Principal Secretary ACS Environment and Forest when he talked about agroforestry. And agroforestry has tremendous potential because farmers can utilize their lands to grow such trees that have commercial benefit, that helps to sequester carbon and is overall very important from the country's perspective of increasing the green cover and increasing carbon sequestration. At the same time, the kind of sustainable agricultural practices that have to be in place are also very important. So the Government of India through the Agriculture Ministry is following a very specific action plan for climate-friendly agriculture, which means how much of water that is used, what kind of crops, what kind of agricultural practices, chemicals and fertilizers that actually would have negative impact on the soil and water conditions. So all of these are part of the national mission, and state governments are also devoting a lot of attention to it. If you go to the state UP government's climate action plan, agriculture. So I think you will find a lot of answers out there, as indeed other states have which have also released their documents.
Can we have a round of applause for this? Okay. Yes, a round of applause first. Yes, very interesting answers as well as the questions from Tata Trust. There you go. Please identify yourself.
Yes, sir. I'm Malaji Nagarjuna, representing AP Pollution Control Board. My question is, a lot of knowledge is piling up at the top level. It has to trickle down to the farmer. What simple measures, like communicating in their language, can be brought into the top system so that the knowledge which is existing, वो farmer तक जाए, farmer समझे, willfully उसको adopt करे और results जो है वो जल्दी आ जाए, सबके लिए question.
Okay, so I have to again go back to Leena only because I think she has an overarching perspective on this. Over to you.
थैंक यू. आपने बहुत अच्छा प्रश्न पूछा कि सिंपल लैंग्वेज में जो डिफरेंट लेवल्स ऑफ लोकल गवर्नमेंट हैं, और आशीष ने मेंशन भी किया था, म्यूनिसिपल बॉडीज़ हैं, पंचायत हैं, उन तक भी हमें अपना संदेश पहुंचाना है. और संदेश में हमें केवल जो समस्या है उसका ही केवल जिक्र नहीं करना है, बल्कि समस्या किस प्रकार से उनके कार्यक्षेत्र पर प्रभाव डालता है. तो जैसे फार्मर्स हैं जो ग्रामीण क्षेत्र हैं, वहाँ पे जो रहने वाले लोग हैं वो क्लाइमेट चेंज को बहुत, अगर हम हायर लेवल की बात करेंगे तो शायद हर व्यक्ति या हर पंचायत इसको समझ नहीं पाएगा कि आखिर उनके लिए इसकी क्या समस्या है. पर अगर हम ये कहते हैं, और जो अभी मैंने एक्शन प्लान देखा यूपी गवर्नमेंट का जो डॉक्यूमेंट रिलीज़ हुआ, उसमें हर डिस्ट्रिक्ट का एनालिसिस किया गया है. ये भी दिखाया गया है कि किस तरह से रेनफॉल में, बारिश के संबंध में जो परिवर्तन आया है, कितनी बरसात हो रही है, कितनी अनसीजनल बरसात हो रही है, इसका सीधा ताल्लुक फार्मर्स से पर पड़ता है, क्योंकि उनकी पूरी जो उनका कल्टीवेशन, उनके क्रॉप्स हैं, पूरी तरह बहुत बुरी तरह प्रभावित हो जाते हैं. और जो मुख्यमंत्री जी ने कहा कि अक्टूबर के महीने में अगर बाढ़ आती है, ये भी ऐसी समस्या है जो हर ग्रामीण समझ सकता है कि ये एक अद्भुत सी अजीब सी चीज़ है और ये एक मैनिफेस्टेशन है क्लाइमेट चेंज का. तो ये रहा समस्या का सवाल. अब इसका समाधान कैसे किया जाए, इसके बारे में मुझे बताते हुए खुशी है कि जो पंचायती राज मंत्रालय है, पंचायती राज मंत्रालय ने, भारत सरकार ने सारे पंचायती राज विभाग जो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स के हैं, इनके साथ मिलके क्लीन एंड ग्रीन पंचायत के बारे में बहुत अवेयरनेस जनरेट किया है. और किस प्रकार से ये क्लीन एंड ग्रीन पंचायत, हम सब अच्छी तरह अवगत हैं कि यही क्लीन एंड ग्रीन अगर हमारी कार्यशैली रही, हमारी जीवन शैली रही, तो क्लाइमेट चेंज पे बहुत हम खुद इंडिविजुअल्स के तौर पे, कम्युनिटीज़ के तौर पे हमारा एक पॉजिटिव इफेक्ट हो सकता है. तो ये क्लीन एंड ग्रीन पंचायत की मुहिम छेड़ी गई थी पिछले वर्ष, और इसी वर्ष अगले एक हफ्ते में ऐसे पंचायतों को सम्मानित किया जा रहा है और महामहिम राष्ट्रपति जी के द्वारा पूरे देश में ऐसे पंचायतों का एक तरह से कंपैरिजन किया गया था और वो प्राइजेस भी बांटे जाएंगे। तो ये अवार्ड और ये फेलिसिटेशन एक तरह से पंचायतों को अच्छी तरह अवगत कराता है कि क्या अच्छे कदम हमें उठाने हैं, और जब वो उसकी समस्या के बारे में समझते हैं और सही कदम उठाते हैं, इसी प्रकार से म्यूनिसिपल लेवल पे भी जो स्वच्छ सर्वेक्षण है और उसमें जो अवार्ड्स दिए जाते हैं, इनके ज़रिए ये जानकारी देने का प्रयास किया जा रहा है कि किस प्रकार से अर्बन लोकल बॉडीज़ भी अपने अच्छे कदम उठा के सफाई और प्रॉपर वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट, इस तरह के बहुत सारे एक्शंस ले सकते हैं जिनका इमीडिएट इफेक्ट क्लाइमेट पे एक पॉजिटिव तरीके से पड़ता है। तो थ्रू ऑल दीज एफर्ट्स our hope is and our confidence is that India will show the way and all the states will lead in taking the right steps for addressing the challenge of climate change.
Thank you, ma'am. Very good point. Yes. Okay, so just to close this, what I'll do is that I'll just give each speaker 30 seconds to give one closing remark from your side. I'll start from there. Do you have a mic for her? Yeah.
I think the one thing that I would mention is that as far as the local governments are concerned and the third tier of the government is concerned, I think the magic mantra is devolve and not just delegate on climate change and climate strategies. And that's what I would say.
Yeah. The carbon cycle and water cycle are the two cycles which run our ecological ecosystems and in turn affect the economy. Therefore, these two cycles have to be taken into consideration by balancing the conservation of biodiversity and also taking action against, developing resilience against the climate change. Just to mention one last sentence, we need almost 345 million tons of food grains by 2030. How we meet it by conserving biodiversity is a challenge for all of us. Therefore, we need to come to a proper understanding in developing the strategies. Thank you.
The GCF, as the largest dedicated climate fund globally, has played a critical role in translating the climate priorities of countries as reflected in the updated NDCs into climate investments. In order for us to continue to do this, we are now engaging in the second replenishment process of the Green Climate Fund, so we can mobilize contributions from developed countries and also for countries willing to contribute to the fund, so we can continue supporting ambitious climate action. And this ambitious climate action can be translated in very concrete proposals, such as co-investment platforms, also blue economy projects that we have developed in other geographies and we can develop in India, and also early warning systems. These are some of the options in which we will continue teaming up and partnering with the India government. Thank you.
Okay, Sunil, just 30-second closing remarks from you. What is one point that you want to take home from here?
Yeah, if you have to single out one particular point, I would say the adaptation action has to be very localized, whereas the mitigation action is a little different. Mitigation action taken at one place or the other place doesn't make much difference to the overall GHG pool, because the GHG offset will be the same. But the localized action with regard to the adaptation will play a key role, because identifying that particular local area where there is going to be impact of the climate change is very crucial. For that, as already mentioned by my co-panelists, the data set is very crucial. Identifying those vulnerable areas which are prone to that risk and putting our investment money, because the money is limited, so we have to identify those particular actions and those particular areas where our money is to be put.
Thank you so much. Shailendra, over to you. 30 seconds.
मुझे लगता है अपने देश में क्लाइमेट चैंपियंस की भरमार है। अगर हम उनको लेवरेज करें, जो बात कही गई कि पंचायतों के लेवल पे they can become our kind of ambassador to incentivize, to kind of catalyze climate action on the ground. So we must leverage them, acknowledge them, and policy should support these informal climate champions who are spread across and use them to promote action, which is kind of strengthening resilience on the ground.
Manoj Pingwa, 30 seconds, closing remark.
जी, क्लाइमेट चेंज मिटिगेशन एक्शन के लिए लोकल लोगों का इन्वॉल्वमेंट ज़रूरी है, जैसा हमारे साथी ने कहा कि उनको बात समझ में आनी चाहिए और हम उन पे कोई चीज़ इम्पोज नहीं कर सकते। हम जब तक कोई अल्टरनेटिव नहीं प्रोवाइड करेंगे तो ये सारा कुछ सक्सेसफुल नहीं होगा, इसलिए हमें अल्टरनेटिव भी प्रोवाइड करना चाहिए।
थैंक यू। नीरब?
No, I think the message is very clear. You need to localize all the climate change actions to the gram panchayat, the towns, the municipalities. उस लेवल पर ऐसे शब्दों में जो उनको समझ में आए कि क्या करना है, and then आगे बढ़ना है. Thank you.
Okay, let me just go to ma'am. Leena ma'am, what are the 30-second, take home for you from this session?
I will only like to say this, that all of us are part of this climate change challenge, and we can all make a difference. We can make a difference in our individual lives as proponents of lifestyle for environment, in the choices we make, in the lifestyle that we are practicing, in our daily habits and our behaviors. All departments and states and central government have a very important role to play, but it is also for the industry, the private sector to join hands, because we all have to rise to the occasion, and we can do it. We have shown the will, we have shown the ability and the commitment. Now we have to rise to the challenge. We have to be at the forefront of addressing the challenge of climate change, and we can be a beacon of light to all countries in the developing world, as well as we can show a mirror to the developed world that if there is a will and commitment, there is nothing that is impossible, and we can do it in India together.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. So as a moderator, I have only 3 points that I've taken from this session, and let me just reiterate the point Leena madam said, the scopes, the scale, and the speed. And let me just elaborate this from this things that came out from the panel. One is definitely there's each and every development program, there's a scope for us to climate-proof the program. So that is the point that has been made also, downscaling the data, working at the village level, and looking at the scope. Second is the scale. I think the unprecedented way in which climate change is impacting us, we need to work at scale. It is not that one village, two villages, we have to work at a much, much larger scale. And the speed. Speed is very, very important for us to that. With this, I want to close this session. Can we have a big round of applause for all our panelists here? Over to you, ma'am.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद इस सत्र के सभी वक्ताओं को आपके बहुमूल्य विचारों और सुझावों के लिए। और अब समय है स्मृति चिन्ह प्रदान करने का। ये हमारे हृदय की कृतज्ञता है आपके प्रति। श्री सुनील चौधरी, चीफ वाइल्ड लाइफ वार्डन यूपी से हम अनुरोध करेंगे कि हमारे इस सत्र के सभी वक्ताओं को स्मृति चिन्ह प्रदान करें। सबसे पहले श्रीमती लीना नंदन जी को। ये मिलेट्स हैं जिसके पोषण के लिए जो आह्वान है कि हम सब मोटे अनाज का प्रयोग करें। श्री नीरब कुमार प्रसाद जी, श्री नीरब कुमार प्रसाद जी, श्री मनोज कुमार पिंगुआ जी, श्री सुनील पामीदी जी, श्री सी अचलेंदर रेड्डी जी, सुश्री फराज जहीर जी, डॉक्टर शैलेंद्र द्विवेदी जी, मिस कैरोलिना फ्यूंटेस जी, और हमारे मॉडरेटर डॉक्टर अंजल प्रकाश जी। एक बार सभी वक्ताओं के लिए जोरदार तालियां। समय हो चुका है भोजन का। आप सभी के लिए भोजन की व्यवस्था वहीं जहां पर आपने चाय ग्रहण की, सामने वाले बिल्डिंग में, प्लूटो हॉल में, सेकेंड फ्लोर पर। 1 घंटे बाद यहीं पर दूसरा तकनीकी सत्र प्रारंभ होगा। आप सभी से अनुरोध है कि भोजन ग्रहण करने के बाद इसी सभागार में आने की कृपा करें। अब से 1 घंटे बाद यानी 2 बजे से अगला तकनीकी सत्र प्रारंभ होगा। नमस्कार।